In this tutorial, we're going to show you two different blending techniques. The first is creating really pretty watercolor backgrounds. It's way easier than it looks. And the second is creating really pretty blended lettering. So thank you to Consumer Crafts for sending us all the supplies that we used in this video. All of the pens and the blending kit were from consumercrafts.com, so be sure to check out the link in the description below. Let's get started. So we'll be using this blending kit, and the blending kit comes with a blending palette, which it's basically a laminated piece of paper, and it has the Tombow dual brush pen color chart on the back, but this is where we'll do our blending. The mister, so it's like a little mister that sprays out water in really fine amounts, and the Tombow dual brush blending pen. So the first project will be creating blended backgrounds. So we'll need the blending palette and the mister for this one. So the first step is going to be taking some water-based brush pens, and you can use something like the Ecoline brush pen. These are great. I just got the pastel pack, which comes with some really pretty pastel colors. They do show up very light and pastel in the background. So if you want something that's a little bit brighter, you would want to use some brighter colors. I'm going to use some Tombow dual brush pens and just draw some random splotches of color on here. If you press down fairly hard, then enough of this ink will come out for this to work well. Okay, so next I'm going to take this mister, and it's just a mini spray bottle, and I'm going to hold it kind of far away and spray evenly over the color that's on the palette. And the colors are already starting to blend together. All right, next I'm going to take some watercolor paper, and this is 140-pound Canson watercolor paper. The rough side is here. I'm going to flip it over and set it down so that the rough side is on this palette, and just press it down and lift it back up here. And now we can see the beginnings of our background to be formed. So next I'm just going to take a little bit of this water off, just soak it up, and then use these beautiful little specks of color that are left on the palette and go back on the page and go around it. So I'm just pressing down kind of randomly to get some more specks of color. And of course, the more water you use, the more you'll be able to spread this around, but also the more water you use, the more the colors will blend together. So this almost looks like a spray paint effect. Now I'm going to show you, if you used some more water, how to get more of a solid but blended look. So I'll use a little bit more water than I did last time, just a few more sprays on here. So you can really see the color starting to bead up on the palette. And let's go back to our piece of paper. So I will use this empty side over here and just try to, normally I would put the watercolor paper on top, but because this is still wet, I'm going to flip this over and set it down. And then we can press it down a bit, carefully lift it back up so you can see how much more of a solid color this is. We can still go around the edges and add some of those neat little splatter effects. But this is going to be a much more solid color because of how much water we used and how much the colors are blending together. So I really like the look of when this dries. It'll have some nice darkness around the edges, but if you wanted to soak some of that up now, you could. So now we're going to look at some blended lettering. So this is just a piece of marker paper. I've just cut out a little square of it, and I'm going to write a word in a fairly dark color. You'll see why in a second. So let's just write this out with brush lettering. And then you can take a piece of marker paper and put it on top, or if you want to save paper like I do, you can just fold this in half. All right, so now you can see that this paper is thin enough that you can see through it, which is also why I chose to use a dark color to write with, so that I can see it well. So now I'm going to take two different colors and color over sections of these letters here. So I'm just picking sections to trace over as best as I can and do this for the entire word. Now you can probably tell why I wanted to write the word first, because like this, it would be really hard to do freehand, but being able to see through this and actually trace over it makes it so much easier. So if you didn't have transparent paper like this, you could write out your word in a really light color, like maybe gray, or something that doesn't have a lot of color in it. So now we have all of the color areas done. So I will take the blending pen that came in the blending kit, and now everywhere that the colors meet with each other, I'm going to do some light strokes and blend them together. Okay, so there we have our nice and blended lettering. So the goal of using the blender pen is to get rid of any harsh lines where the colors meet up and make it just a nice smooth transition. So it's important to use really smooth paper. Just don't get carried away and go over a spot too many times with the blender pen, because then you might start to tear up the paper or it might start to bleed through. So here is what the first watercolor blend looks like now that it's dry. So that's a really pretty background. And this is the one that was a more solid color. It's still drying a little bit because remember we used a lot more water for this one, but the color is nice and smooth. We don't have all of these defined little shapes and spots. It's just a smooth background with some color variation. So this takes a lot of playing around with and a lot of experimentation to get the colors that you want, but sometimes you can't really predict how it's going to end up, and lots of little happy accidents occur. I really like the little small details. It kind of looks like there's some clouds in here, and I like how the edges are defined. I think this would be really neat to do some lettering on top of, and just a really pretty background. So these are the two projects that we worked on today. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks again to consumercrafts.com for sending us these supplies. All of the pens and the blending kit that we used today are available on their website, which is in the description below.